Yay, all right, we're live. Good. So, hi everybody, and welcome to the third Knot, an open sharing session where every week we're welcoming different speakers to talk about their passion and just sharing different interests so we can bring people together with who might sort of have a common interest in something. Last week we had Lavanya talking to us about podcasting, and the week before Vishnu spoke to us about photography. Today, my good friend Noufal is joining us to talk about one of his passions, calligraphy. And I've known Noufal now for 3-4 years. He's an amazing guy with a wide range of interests. Well known as a Pythonista, as a Emacs fanboy, as one of the organizers of PyCon. One of his hobbies is calligraphy. It's something which I know nothing about. And one of those days, I think about a month back, when he was here in Bangalore, Rahul Gonzalez and I had caught up at his office, and when Noufal was there, he was showing us some of his work with calligraphy. We got into an interesting discussion, and Noufal was just so passionate about it that I thought this would be a great topic for people to hear more about and to know about his passion and why he's into it. So welcome, Noufal, and I'll let you take it away.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so I thought I'd start talking a little bit about how I got into this, because like this is not like it's not like one of the problems I have with practicing this is that I don't know many people who actually do it other than me. So I just talk about how I got into it, and then I'll talk about how I practice and show you some of the tools which people use for this kind of thing. And then after that, I'll give you some tips and stuff if you're interested in starting off by yourself. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds great. Pretty interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the thing is, when I was younger, I don't remember how, but I got myself one of those chisel edged markers. You know, the kind of thing which you get when you buy the highlighting markers. It looks something like this. The nib looks sort of like that. It's not pointed. It's like a flat kind of nib.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got something like this, and if you just scribble with this, you get interesting kinds of what do you call it? Like if you hold this at an angle and write, it sort of becomes thick at some point, thin at some point, so it looks nice even if you don't know what you're doing. So I got this when I was a kid, and from that time onwards, I've been interested in this, but I didn't know things like what is calligraphy and all that. But just this idea of writing, which writing artistically, became interesting to me. The first real tool itself which I got was I think I still have it. Yeah, it's this pen. This is the cap. This is the pen. You can see the nib if you look at it. You see it?
Yeah.
It's a fountain pen, and this is a chef. They sell a set of these things. So they sell you 3 nibs, a bunch of cartridges, and like one body. I don't know if it's available now anymore. I haven't seen it in shops these days. But they sell you 3 nibs of 3 widths. So this is like a broad nib. You get a medium one and you get a fine one. This was the first tool itself which I got, and it comes with a small instruction booklet, and that's how I started messing with it. But those things are they're not very systematic and all that. But I tried writing with it, but I never got very far. I really started getting into this, I think, around 2010-ish or so, because at the time, bought a bunch of books on the subject, and I started trying to practice more systematically. So I used to there's some rules, I'll talk about that later. There's some rules of how do you actually draw rulings and things like that, and then you what do you call it? There's a way of practicing and things like that. So I started doing that, and within a year or so, I sort of exhausted what a fountain pen could actually give me, because this thing has its own limitations. The ink flow is not under your control and things like that. You start noticing details like this when you start using it for a while. And then one of my trips to the US, I actually took the plunge and bought myself a dip pen, which is like this is a holder. So it's like this is what it looks like. Yeah. It is a pen holder, and you buy nibs separately. So this is a nib.
Interesting.
what does it look like? Then you take the nib, you stick it into the holder like that. Then you have an old-fashioned pen, and you dip this into ink, you shake off the extra ink, and then you actually write with it. Like this gives you the maximum amount of control, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. It's the most expressive thing, but it requires a lot of practice to actually wield this thing properly, because you can easily mess it up, and you can mess up your whole desk with watery ink and stuff like that. So this is what I use these days for practice. And the thing is, a friend of mine told me, you're the kind of person that should always have been born 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because I'm always interested in stuff that was once there but which is no longer there now. So, and especially these days, like with digital typography and things like that, things like calligraphy are sort of dying out, although it's becoming specialized. Like few people do it here and there. So it's something which I like. And the other thing is, and also related to handwriting. So I think that's also important, because that kind of thing is it's a very intense personal part of you, right? Your handwriting. It's one time you know the handwriting of your friends because you receive letters from them and stuff like that. But nowadays that's not there anymore, which is kind of sad in a certain nostalgic kind of way. All right, so that's basically the way I've written a blog and thing about this. If you want, you can look at it on my site, andibrahim.net.in. It's there's an entry which I wrote a few years ago, in detail about how I got into this, the tools I use and stuff like that. So I'll just talk a little bit about the tools which people use and how I practice. So like I said, there's two, broadly speaking, there's two kinds of calligraphy. There's what we call the square nib calligraphy, which uses nibs like what I just showed you. That's stuff like this. This one. Yeah. This is typical square nib. You can see that the nib is flat, and you can use this to write stuff like this is like something which I was scribbling yesterday. Back to front. Yeah. So this is done with a marker, but so the thing is, you can write stuff like that with nib like this if you use this thing. This is square edge calligraphy. So it has a different set of rules, different set of hands, as they call it. We don't call them fonts, we call them hands, and it works like that. So the typical kinds of things which you see, like when we talk about italics and Gothic and stuff like that, are all square nib fonts or square nib hands. The other kind of calligraphy which you might see is, I think I have a sample of it somewhere here. No, one sec. The other kind of thing which you might find is what we call pointed nib calligraphy. For that, you use a different kind of nib. It looks like this. You can see that the nib looks like this. It's got a sharp point. It's not flat. And the trick is that when you actually apply pressure on this, the nib actually splits. Can you see it splitting? I don't know if it's visible.
Right.
So the idea is, like with the square nib, the thing is the angle of the nib controls the width of the letter. Right? If you hold it like perfectly at 0 degrees, you'll get like the full width of the letter. If you hold it at 90 degrees, you'll get like a straight line. And depending on what angle you hold it, you'll get different widths. So when you actually hold a pen like that and move it, depending on what angle you hold it, you get different curves. With the pointed nib, it's different. It's the pressure on the nib that controls the width of the letter. So you can actually do different kinds of hands. This is an example of a pointed nib script. I don't know if it's visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this thing is what's called copperplate. This hand is called copperplate. It's a different style of writing, and the way you practice and the way you draw your rulings and all that is different. So there's these two general classifications. This pointed nib, which is like a little more modern than square nib, and this square nib. I'm not much of a pointed nib fan, although I can do it a little bit. I bought myself a pen called Noodler Ahab. It's a fountain pen, but it's got a flexible nib. So I can carry this around, like I can use it as a normal pen, but when I need to actually show off, I can actually do a little bit of pointed pen calligraphy with this. So this is something which I So these are the two broad areas, and like what you do generally, how you practice this kind of thing is, first what you do is you create what are called rulings. So rulings are usually done depending on your hand and depending on which hand you want to write and stuff like that. Basically, the idea is you create what's called a, you create what's called a nib ladder. A nib ladder is like, you know, a ladder on the side. You take a piece of paper and you actually draw these things on the edge. You see this? You see these things, right? These ups and downs over here. Like there's a mark up, there's a mark down, there's a mark up, there's a mark down. This is called a nib ladder. And that gives you, like, you know, how high or how low. I mean, that gives you like some way of actually measuring. Like you can say 5 nibs, 6 nibs, etc. And then you actually rule based on that. So depending on the hand you're doing, you'd have something like, you know, the simple letter like an X without anything that goes up or down. Anything that goes above the thing is called an ascender. Anything like sort of like a D or, you know, an H or something which goes from the top, that's called an ascender. Anything which goes below is called a descender. So if you have something like a G or a J, it has a line that goes below the baseline. That's called a descender. So your basic width, which is like, you know, the width of the height of a letter like X or an O, is called the X height. And ascenders and descenders have different heights. So you rule something that looks like this. So you can see here that the base, the X height, the basic thing is some around here. It's, you know, there's some height and there's some space for an ascender, some space for a descender. You're actually supposed to draw this by hand and, you know, get it right. But then I being, you know, programmer and lazy and all that, I wrote a script to actually generate PDFs of this thing and I put it online. So if you're feeling lazy about drawing rulings, you can always use this script. And it's quite popular also. I get a lot of mails from, you know, professional calligraphers who tell me that, you know, your ruling script is very useful, this and that. Can you add spirals? Can you add circles and things like that?
Wait, did I hear Ruby script?
No, it's a Python script.
Okay, all right.
It's like a ruling script. It draws.
Ruling script, got it, okay.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, this is the basic thing. Once you get this, what you do is like I'm not going into detail about all the stuff. You'll have to anyway read up if you want. But the thing is, once you get this, you put a piece of paper on top of this. You clip your these things together using a paper clip or something, and then you actually practice writing. When you write, you write something like this. So this is an example of one of my practice sheets. Let's see if I can. Yeah. So this is an example of one of my practice sheets. This is something which I did, I think, December of last year. So this is a hand. It's called foundational. It's like the basic hand which people learn first when you do calligraphy. And the way you practice is like you get a book or something which actually tells you how these letters are drawn. So there's some rules about, like, you know, when you want to draw an O, you're not supposed to just draw a circle. You're supposed to first draw it from left to right, then go back to the top and draw it right to left. Those kind of rules of how to construct letters is what we call a ductus. And then you construct your stuff like that. You learn how you practice using that, and you write something like this. This is what in calligraphy is called rhythm practice. Like you select a piece of text, and then you sit down. You complete the entire piece of text in one shot, writing rhythmically. Then what you do is, like later, next day or something, you read what you've written. You figure out all the mistakes. You make a note of all the mistakes, and then you practice those mistakes and get them right. So here you won't have words, you'll just have, you know, the specific letters which you made mistakes with, specific combinations which you made mistakes with, and then you fix all of them. Right, so I had issues with the way I wrote the A, I think, yeah. So you can see that I've rewritten the A lots of times, so you're trying to correct that. Same thing with T, W, double T's, you know, ligatures for double T's, things like that. So you fix your correction. So every practice session is one piece of rhythm and one piece of analysis. That's the way you're supposed to practice if you want to, you know, improve your style without a teacher. Okay, so generally speaking, this is it's like a broad overview. If you want to actually practice calligraphy, I have a, you know, very concrete recommendation, which is one single book, and which is probably the only book you should read on the subject, because there's a lot of, you know, calligraphy for dummies, teach yourself calligraphy in 25 days and things like that, which I tried myself and which I learned a lot of bad habits which I've been struggling to actually undo. So the only book which you should really get is this. It's called Foundations of Calligraphy. It's by Sheila Waters. She is widely considered like the queen of calligraphers these days. So this book actually describes in detail how you're supposed to write and what you're supposed to do, and like how to avoid burnout when you're practicing. And she's a calligraphy teacher as well as a professional. So it's a very detailed book. It teaches you like step by step what to do and stuff like that. So it's what I recommend if you want to get yourself a copy of this and start off with it. It tells you how to build your basic tool. So initially you don't start with a dip pen or anything. You start with two pencils stuck together, so it looks sort of like a sort of like a nib, but it's two pencils that are stuck together, and then you build up from that to a fountain pen, to a dip pen. Some people use a brush because you can also do it on stuff like that.
It's probably something that you can implement in Canada.
Right. So yeah, that's basically the overall view of things. And I think if you have any specific questions, I can take them right now. I have a website where I put up my stuff. It's called calligraphy.in. You can go to the site. I occasionally post pictures of scans or photos of sheets which I practice, which I think look good or better than others.
Hey Noufal, this is Vishnu. So on the ruling sheet you showed us, there are some diagonal lines. What are those?
Yeah, so the thing is like for different kinds of hands, there's an angle at which you have to hold the pen.
Okay.
So for some you have to hold them, like if you're doing italics, you have to hold them like at 40 degrees or so. If you're doing uncials, which is like your what people commonly call Irish style letters, like you must have seen them on in pubs and places.
Right.
That kind of thing. If you want, you have to hold the pen like really flat, around 10 or 15 degrees. So it's hard to actually do it by eye at first. So I got the diagonal rulings to help me hold the pen right.
I see.
So actually, if you go to calligraphy.in and go to the rulings link, I've actually described exactly what each of these things mean and how you can configure all of them.
Awesome.
It generates a PDF. Yeah.
Sorry, this is Raj here. Hey, really interesting and sort of nice to see, something that's more traditional and less digital.
Yes, it's the opposite of computers, right? Because you can't do backspace, you can't do incremental, plan everything in advance. I can write like a piece that takes like an hour to write and make a spelling mistake in the last word, and then I have to just throw away the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's just a skill that is sort of is traditional. It's sort of nice to see a presentation on it. What are some of the practical applications these days? I mean, given that a lot of things have got digitized and the print and digital.
So one of the things which I follow a bunch of professional calligraphers on Twitter and via email. There's a list called Cyber Scribes, which I'm on, where I ask questions and things. So most of the guys, the applications which come up is one is they do invitations. So like bespoke invitations. You design an invitation by hand and you actually write it out, stuff like that, which is something they get a lot of money to do, commissions. The other thing which is done is like decorating books, and so it's related to bookbinding. So most calligraphers are also bookbinders. So they have like a custom book on something, and they actually write out much of it and bind it in a specific kind of fashion. Those are the kinds of commissions they get. The other thing which is done is like so there's some cute things, like for example the Cyberscribes list has I think a Christmas and Thanksgiving card exchange. So everyone makes greeting cards by themselves, and they send it out to each other, and you're paired with some guy from somewhere and you have to actually make a greeting card and send it out. I don't have the guts to do it because all the people there are like really good, but yeah, so stuff like that. I myself use it for thank you notes. I make gifts for people. Like I made one for I think Rahul. I made a few for others, things like that. So I also like I like my sister's wedding album stuff. I've been trying to decorate it using this and things like that. So that's what I do it for. I usually, but personally speaking, I don't know of any, apart from these, I don't know any practical applications. I use it like, it counterbalances my daily life, which is like, programming and stuff. This is like the complete other extreme. So I think it helps me keep my sanity.
Nice.
Yeah. So, are there any special, papers or sorts that you have to use for these kind of things?
Yeah, so there are calligraphic papers which are like, so there's a shop I think on Residency Road, I think, near the Print Express. He just sells high quality papers. I found the place before I started doing calligraphy, so I don't know if he's still around or what, but the papers I specifically, some of the things which you need is like, you need the paper to be transparent, little bit transparent, because you need the rulings to show through, or you have to have a light table, which is like a glass table with a bulb at the bottom, and you put this whole thing on top and the light shines up so that you can actually see through. So you need something that's somewhat transparent. You need it to be, you can't have it too glossy, like chart, If it's very glossy, like there's no hold on the nib. You need that grit, a little bit of, roughness, so that you can actually control your hand. Then the other thing which you need is like, the paper should not be too, I don't know what the word is, like furry. Like if it feels a bit soft, it'll actually suck the ink up.
It'll blot out.
So if your paper, if your paper is a little old, like I buy one packet at a time, and I buy small packets, because if I keep a large number of papers, once they age a little bit, they start soaking up the ink, and it looks really bad. So usually I think 80 GSM bond paper. There's a company called JK Copier. So that's the paper which I found that works best for me. It's I think 75-80 GSM, the photocopy paper, bond paper, something they call it. And I think I have a this thing. You must have seen this at these stationery shops. I think, yeah, this. So I use this for practicing, and it's worked pretty well for me. I sometimes, like the examples which I showed you were on slightly tinted paper, which I got from what's that place called, William Penn in Koramangala. So it's not that transparent, and the paper has a little bit of texture, so it's kind of hard to write on with a steel nib. But yeah, I mean it's okay, it's not bad. So yeah, that's basically the thing. You have to basically experiment with a bunch of papers to find out what works best. This is what works for me. I also use a special kind of ink, which is like this. This is Winsor Newton calligraphic ink. So you can either use gouache colors, but with colors the headache is like you have to mix up a certain quantity, and then you waste. It's expensive, so you don't want to waste anything. But then you have to mix up a certain amount, and then if there's something left over, you're like, shit, it's gone and all that. So I also sometimes use poster colors, but then if you're using colors, you can't dip your pen into it. You have to use a brush, take the paint onto the brush, and then load the nib and then write with it. So you hold them both like this. You write, you come here, you load, write, load, write, load. But you can get more colors with that. But when I practice, I use this. The nice thing about this is like this is sort of like what was traditionally called iron gall ink. It's an ink that sort of when you write, it has a certain color, but once it dries up, it sort of becomes a scale-like thing on the paper, and it's much more brilliant than regular fountain pen ink, which has like pigments. Which like the pigment sort of flakes out. So if you write with something broad nib, say, there's a lot of ink that's deposited onto the paper. So what happens is like once the whole thing dries, if you just rub your hand on the paper, the thing sort of comes off like as if you've written with a soft pencil. So calligraphic inks, I think I bought all the bottles I could find in Bangalore, and I've been checking if they have stock. They haven't restocked yet, so I think you won't get in Bangalore anymore. All of them are with me. I usually order all my stuff from this website online called John Neal Books. Shipping is expensive, so I order like once in a few months. I order like 10-15 nibs, 5-6 bottles of ink, packet of papers, stuff like that, one shot.
Okay. So one more question. I mean, I assume that the initial stages of getting started with something like this should be frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
So, any tips on that side? Because I've tried it myself a bunch of times, and then I've like broken nibs and stuff because I got irritated. So,
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly what I did, but like I'll say one thing, which was that at the time, like when I actually got started with this, I lived in a house without a net connection. So, so I didn't have any distractions. I come back home after work, and I was alone at the time. I was staying alone. I come back home. I take this thing out, and then I start. So yeah, you just have to work through that part. There's a Zen Pencils cartoon which I linked to a few days ago. A quote by this Ira Glass about practice. I just tweeted about it. It's like my favorite comic on the website, which basically says like when you have that kind of a thing, the only way to do it is to break through it with lots of practice. And really, that's the only way. After a while, there's this jump in your level of skill, which is like really gratifying. You're like, shit, man, I can do this. So yeah,
I think that's the case with everything. I mean,
I think so. Yes, there's that barrier which you just have to keep overcoming, time after time. So this is like my collection of nibs, if you want to see.
Wow.
There's like, I most of my nibs are by an American company called Speedball. My holder also was a Speedball holder. It's not the best, but it works. They get rusted and all that. The really good ones are by this company called Leonard. There's they're like they do some specialized kind of metals for correct tension and all that, and like that's what all the pros use. So maybe I'll buy some Leonard nibs. So they're very costly. Yeah.
Hey,
so
Noufal,
one last question. Yeah. So now that you're a little bit down the line with calligraphy, how do you, for lack of a better word, judge the current typography, things going on, like when you see things online or when you see invitations or stuff like that?
Yeah, so the thing is like one thing which is different about calligraphy is that everything you do is different. Like with digital typography, it's not like that, right? Like like if you use a certain font and you use a certain kind of color and like your RGB and you fix it up, it looks the same no matter how many times you do it. So with written stuff, it's not like that. Like just the guy's hand, the physical nature of the hand, there'll be slight differences. And when you actually practice this, you tend to notice that. So there's a certain individuality in every piece that's done calligraphically, as opposed to something which is done. I mean, like of course there's the act of creativity that comes when you actually, even when you do something digitally. But yeah, I mean, this thing is there. That personal touch, that ultimate personal touch is missing when you do it digitally.
so Noufal, I had a sort of related question, which is, what is the sort of influence or intersection of calligraphy and typography as it relates, for instance, to font design?
Yeah, so I mean, most modern calligraphers are typeface designers. So everyone who's like post internet, like in our generation, like calligraphers of our generation are mostly like font designers. Like this lady whose book I showed you, her son is a calligrapher. He's also a font designer. So everyone seems to be going that way. And I read an article about one of a guy named Sebastian Lester, who's a font designer. He says like if you do calligraphy, your sensitivity to all these tiny details improves, and so you can become a better font designer. I think Steve Jobs took a bunch of calligraphy courses. He seems to be talking. He seems to mention that every time he talks, and that influenced his decisions with many of the typographical aspects of his work on the Apple OS. So, yeah, I think I don't know exactly because I'm not really into digital type. I can't tell Times Roman from some other font someone gives me. So when Kiran and Rahul and all they talk about kerning and stuff like that, I just wave my hand and act snobbish and walk off. Really, I'm not really a font geek as such. Anything else? So yeah, so basically, like if you want to know how I went through this, you can look at my blog post. It's on my site, anibrahim.net.in, and calligraphy.in is where I put my, so it's called a Twitter feed. So if you follow it, you get a tweet when I update it. If you have any specific questions and you want to try this thing out and all that, and let me know. I have a bunch of spare nibs, so if you have Like if you meet me, I can give you one or two if you want.
Hey, Noufal, have you ever tried any printing techniques like woodblock etching or
I
etching in
haven't tried
stone and then
woodblock,
printing?
but I've tried some artistic kind of stuff with this. That's like, I've used what you call resists and stuff like that. Resists are like it's sort of like an ink, but when you write with it, what happens is it dries up and it becomes like a plastic on top of the paper. And then you paint on top of the paper and you peel out the ink, so you get a reverse kind of effect. So I've done things like that, but I haven't really, done woodblock and bookbinding and that kind of thing. Maybe just a second. So I haven't done anything like that, but I have tried these kinds of effects. That's all. I think I don't know if there's any good one that I've done, but oh yeah, I have one which this one. This was like my attempt to write. You heard the William Blake poem Tiger Tiger.
Right.
This was supposed to look like tiger skin, and this was actually, it was written first, and then that the black and orange was applied on top, and then the written stuff was removed, so you get a reverse effect.
Interesting.
So I particularly like this piece
It was
because
written first, and then you added the other colors.
yeah. So what you do is there's something called resist, it's also called masking fluid. So specialized kind of thing. I can't like Hangouts doesn't have smell, so I can't show you what this thing smells like. But it's basically a white kind of liquid, and if you write with this, it feels like ink, but once it dries, it becomes like rubbery plastic that's stuck to the paper. And then you paint on top of that however you want. And once you're done painting, you peel this thing off. So that part remains white. The Tiger Tiger thing I'm particularly fond of because I did it just after I listened to that Neil Gaiman talk on Make Good Art. I don't know if you've heard that one. Have you heard it?
No, I
So
haven't.
Neil Gaiman had a talk which was like the theme was Make Good Art.
Yeah.
So I heard that and I did this and I tweeted it saying this was inspired by Neil Gaiman, and he retweeted it. And then like the next day I was like, man, how did you do it and this and that and whatnot. So it's my claim to fame. So
Yeah, Neil himself. Nice.
he himself retweeted it. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, so that's basically. But I haven't really tried, like what you said, those exotic kind of things, woodblock and stuff like that.
Do you stay in Bangalore? Where do you stay?
I used to be in Bangalore. I'm no longer there. I'm in Calicut right now.
All right.
I was actually.
Hand at screen printing, you could probably make the film of the screen yourself, like you'll have to make it yourself by hand, like you do. And then it'll help you sort of mass produce it. And not mass produce in any sense of mass produce, but create copies quickly. It might be a nice exercise to just learn that technique, not for anything else.
So
but-
one thing which I've been thinking about and which I actually made a bunch of cards. I don't have any left, but they're basically tips from that book, Pragmatic Programmer.
Uh-huh.
And I made them like they were like postcard size, each one was about the size of a postcard, and each one had one tip. I think there's one or two of them on calligraphy.net. And
If those could be useful, you should sell them.
yeah. So a lot of people said you get these things printed and sell them as a set or something, and that's my New Year's resolution for this year. It's the only thing is like once it becomes like that and it's no longer just a hobby, then you have to take it seriously, and then the whole thing collapses. You actually sit and practice and make sure that everything is right. You don't want to ship something that's not perfect, and all that headache comes in, which you don't have when you're just practicing for yourself.
Yeah.
But then it's nice to actually have, if someone is willing to part with their money just to buy something which you have made, that's sort of a vindication. Yeah, so that's the thing. But then I should actually try it. Yeah, it's true. What you're saying is true. I actually was supposed to give a talk about this at one of the bar camps, but something happened. I couldn't make it.
So we're glad we could make this happen now, Phil. So
Cool. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you have any questions and you want to try it out, and we're going to meet up when you come to when I come to Bangalore like once in 2 months or so. So we're going to meet up about this or something. Let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Shreyas, I think you'll be getting your nibs out soon.
Yeah, I'll try again.
Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to start with nibs. You can get like the Parker calligraphy.
I have that's the one that I have.
Yeah, I think it doesn't cost much either. You can get some normal script. Script ink is what I used to use, the Sheffer ink. You get that, and you can start off with that. Not a problem. The headache is just that consistent practice. That's not fun at first. I have the old stuff which I used to write like long ago when I first started out. I keep it with me just as a reminder to tell me how far I've come, which is encouraging because yeah. So this is stuff which I used to do. I'll just show you one or two. This was from 2012 or so. Yeah. So, I mean, if I look at this right now, I can see tons of mistakes with this. It's like all the letters are wrong and this and that. And this was like from much later. This is 2013 after I moved back to Calicut, which is like, much better.
Wow.
This is, and then now it's become slightly better now. I've been practicing capitals these days. It's not much fun compared to.
Hey, Noufal, if you come to Bangalore,
Yeah.
hit me up. I'll show you some calligraphy on the road.
Oh, okay. So the thing is like there's this distinction between lettering and calligraphy.
So this is definitely calligraphy.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like people tend to like a lot of people send me links about modern lettering and stuff, which I mean, it's nice of course, but it just doesn't do it for me. I mean, that's not the kind of.
Where is it? Where in the city do you see it?
At Asalia.
Oh, okay.
But
So-
I'll have to ask someone you know to take you there because I don't live in Bangalore.
Ah,
So you're Pratik Pooja's brother.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I follow her on Twitter. I've seen stuff which she posts about this.
Pooja Saxena's brother. Okay.
Yeah.
I hate all of you.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that's basically the thing. There's a quote by this chap which sort of conveys my interest in this. It's what letters are symbols that turn matter into spirit. Which is kind of nice, right? You write about it nicely and it immortalizes that thing. It's sort of like taking a photo, but in a much more subtle kind of way.
Hmm.
I've always believed that type is something that can convey a lot, even if it's just text.
Yeah, I mean, I like if I borrow a book from somebody, I try to put a thank you note which I calligraph into it. Things like that. It's kind of nice. It's very personal, right? It's a very sensual thing, and sensual I mean in the sense of like using your senses. It's very. So I try to do it. I don't know. I'm just old-fashioned that way.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like almost embarrassed about the whole thing. I mean, my handwriting over the years has gotten to a point where I think I'm now qualified to be a doctor because I think no one can understand my handwriting. So my wife makes fun of it. She's got a few of those Sakura pens lying around, so I think I'll probably borrow one of her pens.
You can get a bunch of these pens. I think these things are like you can get them on eBay. I think 5 of them cost 150 rupees or something. They're
Nice.
marked with a small chisel nib.
Nice.
You can do quick and dirty stuff like all this stuff I did using that.
Hmm.
Nice how you refer to that as quick and dirty.
Quick and dirty, I know.
So this is doodling really. I mean, but it has no like all the proportions are probably wrong and stuff like that. But sometimes you just want to have fun and follow the rules.
So this is really nice. Thank you so much, Noufal.
Thank you, man.
We'll have to have you back for another session at some point once I think all of us are things wet. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll announce the next knot sometime, I think early next week, and looking forward to seeing all of you guys around. So.
Thank you, Noufal. Thanks, Noufal. Great session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noufal.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.